And now, welcome our next speaker.
Good morning, everyone. When Yvonne said bigger speakers this year, she really meant taller speakers. But first of all, thank you for giving up your day for such an important topic, and thank you to Yvonne and the organizers for this event. We thought we'd start the day off with a bit of historical context. What's this AI fuss all about? How does Canada play a role in all of this? So I'm going to rewind the clock a little bit and then look forward. Okay, so what you see on the screen here, this is a neural network, an artificial neural network. This is how computer scientists try to mimic how the human brain works. So the human neocortex, it has these neurons, and they're stacked in multiple layers. And every additional layer has gleams some insight from the input that a human perceives. And in this case, a computer scientist has trained what's called an image classifier. And what you have fed in is an image. And each one of those pixels on the screen, the intensity of, since this is a color image, the intensity of the red, green, and blue pixels are fed into this neural network on the input layer. And then that signal is propagated throughout the network and along these axons that have a weight to them. And the next layer will be composed of all the input multiplied by the weight that's set. And if this network is trained properly, then the dog neuron lights up and not the cat neuron. And so this, conceptually is pretty simple, and again, inspired by the human brain. And ever since computers were first invented, computer scientists thought, hey, great, we can now mimic how the human brain works. And this is an early attempt at it. Actually, the very first conference on artificial intelligence was in 1956. And the conclusion from that was, hey, if we get a couple of bright people and spend a summer on it, we can make meaningful progress towards AI. A little bit optimistic, turns out. Here in 1960 is a picture of somebody trying to mirror that human brain, connecting a bunch of physical wires back here. But whether it was a physical wire, an analog signal, or now all done in silicon, it turned out to be a really hard problem. The problem was people didn't know how to connect these neurons, and they didn't know how to program these weights. So people actually tried for years, decades, in fact, and eventually gave up. And so by 1970s, they said, this way of trying to simulate neural networks to simulate human intelligence is a path to failure. There are other ways of doing it. So computer scientists start to program these rules and use statistics and different ways of trying to mimic the human brain. And into this world actually came a professor, Geoffrey Hinton. And Geoffrey comes from a noble lineage. His great-great-grandfather was a mathematician by the name of George Boole, responsible for Boolean logic, so a statistician in the UK. And all of computer chips the logic is set around Boolean logic. But he was a computational psychologist in his undergrad and really wanted to understand how the human brain worked. But when he graduated in 1971, I believe it was, he looked at the graduate work in this field, and he didn't feel that anything that the computer scientists were doing even closely resembled how the human brain worked. So he became a carpenter for a year. He thought that would be a better use of his time. But eventually he was coaxed back into school, and he completed his PhD in the University of Edinburgh. And then in 1986, he was a prof in Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. And he invented this algorithm called backpropagation. And that is a way of formulating a problem in a way where every problem, the output of the neural network can be formulated as a continual function, or the accuracy of it can be computed as a continual function that you can integrate. So you can take a bunch of calculus on that, and you can say, hey, well, if I now have the integral of all the input into the final layer, then I know how to adjust those weights ever so slightly to improve the accuracy of my model. And then I can backpropagate that error function down into successive layers. So he invented what's called backpropagation in 1986. So think of timelines. 1956, we'll do it over summer. It took 30 years to actually figure out how you could train these neural networks. He found that there was some mild interest. Some people were curious about what he was working on. But the only funding sources he was getting was from DARPA. The US military thought this might help us kill people. So he wasn't very comfortable with that concept and was attracted to come to Canada. In 1987, he moved here. And Canada attracted him for a number of reasons. He felt the political landscape was more in keeping with his core beliefs. And he was attracted to long-range, curiosity-based funding sources here. So funding sources like CFAR and CFI and a number of other granting agencies gave him really long-range funding opportunities. Canada has amazing post-secondary institutions, and we cherish our long-term research and academics. And he found a home here to research this field. And it wasn't just Jeff here in Toronto. There's also a person by the name of Yoshua Bengio in Montreal. And later on, we attracted another American, Rich Sutton, who moved to Edmonton. So these are kind of three core centers of AI research in Toronto that have really seen continual funding for the last 30 years, when the rest of the world these things fell out of favor and funding went up and down. Here, there was a continual long-term funding for it. But despite the kind of early promise and a theory that was now in place, computational resources and data wasn't really sufficient to help them do anything meaningful. So this is an example now, 14 years later. By the year 2000, the first real application of neural networks was in image recognition. So by year 2000, 20% of all US checks were being processed by these neural networks, really trying to recognize hand-drawn digits, black and white digits. Maybe those computer scientists were right. Maybe these neural networks weren't really a path to understanding or simulating how the human brain worked. That doesn't look like intelligence to me. This was kind of coincided with another period, another cold winter of neural network research, where again, all the computer scientists who had had a mild interest in neural networks lost interest and went down different paths. And it's true that other computer science frameworks turned out to be more meaningful or useful in things like automated speech recognition and image challenges. So computer scientists gravitated towards other fields. And during this time, Jeff would say that if he tried to get a paper published with the words neural network on the title, it would be automatically rejected. So he coined the term deep learning, which is really just neural networks, but he's a very good marketing person. And I was actually a grad student here at University of Toronto in '96, and I met him. And what a remarkable person. He was, it was during the cold winter of neural networks. I was advised from doing a thesis in neural networks. But he was so stubborn and confident in what he was doing. He said, I know what I'm doing. Told me it's going to take me another 5 years, but I know exactly what I'm doing. So this is in the year 1996. It actually took him until 2012 to demonstrate that these could do something useful. And really, what happened is that computing power had to catch up and also data sets had to become available. Big data had to become available to train these neural networks. The human brain has trillions of these connections between hundreds of billions of neurons. And so just the computational power around that's required to train these things is immense. But the first actual application of it happened kind of hush-hush. This was in 2011. Jeff and his students, they were starting to make some progress in these neural networks. Nobody was really paying attention. It was kind of happening here quietly in Canada. They figured out it could do remarkable things in perceptual tasks, things like vision recognition and speech recognition. And so on speech recognition, Jeff actually went to BlackBerry and said, hey, I got this pretty cool speech recognition system that beats anything else out there. Would you guys like to try it? Unfortunately, BlackBerry was very married to their keyboard, so they thought, you know, what are you going to do with a speech recognition system? Who's going to talk to their phone? Anyway, one of Jeff's students went to Google for a summer internship in 2011 and implemented a neural network-based speech recognition system. Talk about a powerful internship, right? And in 2011, that actually launched. At the end of 2011, that went into market. And a lot of people who were in the field, they realized that, wow, you know, the accuracy of the Android speech recognition system improved remarkably. And this was at a time, like a year after Siri had launched. And remember when Siri first came out, everybody thought it was going to be magic, but then you quickly became frustrated with it because you got every other word wrong. Well, Google nailed it, but nobody really knew what was going on until this public challenge called the ImageNet Challenge in 2012, which was like the first time a public conference really, they put neural networks to test against classical AI approaches. And the challenge is the following. You're given 15 million high-res images, and you have to properly label what objects are in the images out of 22,000 possible labels. So far removed from those black and white digit recognition, where you have to guess between 0 and 9. Now you have to, you've got high-res images, color, and these things are really difficult. So you can see the computer getting the following images correct. You have a mite and a container ship and a motor scooter and a leopard, but there's images that are incredibly difficult to get right. And just to give you a sense, this competition had been going on for a few years. And computer scientists had come together and created this really large data set. And to train these neural networks, you needed a big training set. But here, this is how good the classical approaches were. They were getting the correct answer 3 images out of 4. So the error rate was about 25%, and not making remarkably fast progress. And out of the blue, Jeff Hinton and his students, they put their submission in, and they got the error rate down to 16%. And the year after that to 11%. Right? And this is a public competition. Anybody can take part in it. And all the computer scientists around the world were floored that this approach that had been relegated to a dustbin and forgotten about was resurrected and did something remarkably better than they could do. I've drawn here on the x-axis the number of layers in this neural network. And it's relevant because for every single layer that you add to one of these neural networks, there's an additional level of abstraction or insight they can glean from the input. Here, their first submission had 8 layers of neural networks. The human neocortex has 6 layers. So if you ever wonder why my company is called Layer 6, it's because the 6th layer is the kind of the integrative layer that produces thought and intelligence. But not to be outdone, the year after that, Google put their submission in, and it had 22 layers. This is what it looked like. And of course, now everybody is jumping at it. So Microsoft, the year after that, had a 152-layer network. Now look at the error rate. So it went from what was 25% down to 3.5%. It's just a few years. And the number of layers of neural network, well, there's no biological constraint, so just keep adding layers, right? So that's 152 layers. The year after that, there was a network called a ResNet that has over 1,000 layers. There's no biological constraint. The other remarkable thing is that if a human being was trained at this task and set to label these images, their error rate would be 5%. Okay, so this is called superhuman capability. And you think how fast this is, right? So before 2012, nobody thought this was possible. Nobody thought self-driving cars was going to be possible. Nobody thought you'd be actually talking to your phone. You know, the world has changed in the last 5 years. And the crazy thing is, it came from 500 meters away from here, right? And the Vector Institute is now on the 7th floor of this building. So it's pretty cool that you know, this all came and originated from here. Just a month ago, Google released a new speech recognition system and a dialogue system. So to really hit it home, I thought we would take a listen to see what it sounds like. Can you guys try to play this?
See, how may I help you?
Hi, I'd like to reserve a table for Wednesday the 7th.
For 7 people?
It's for 4 people.
4 people when?
Next Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Oh, actually, we reserve for like after like 5 people. For 4 people, you can come.
How long is the wait usually to be seated?
For when, tomorrow or weekday or?
For next Wednesday, the 7th.
Oh no, it's not too busy. You can come for 4 people, okay?
Oh, I gotcha. Thanks.
Yep. Bye bye.
All right. So the male voice was a computer. Crazy, superhuman capability. It's kind of scary, actually. In this case, so Google programmed these bots to do simple things, make reservations at restaurants, hair appointments, these types of things. Usually involves a phone call to somebody and figuring out a schedule. And that recording was done without the recipient knowing that they were talking to a computer. Google, you know, the computer scientists, a little tone deaf, they released this with great fanfare and thought they were so cool. They actually got a ton of backlash. People were really uncomfortable with the fact that they were being dialed by a computer and then there wasn't disclosure that they were talking to a computer. You know, that's kind of projection of where the future could be. Having these types of interactions with you don't know, are you talking to a computer or a human? So let's talk about what that means. Why are we here? You know, a lot of people, when they hear about AI, there's this fear factor, like what's this going to mean to our jobs? There's actually even a study done on the impact on jobs by automation. This is from University of Oxford. What they did is they went through and they classified all 702 job categories in the US Labor Department statistics. And they looked at them and said, well, how likely are these jobs to be displaced by automation down the line? And the net of it was, they said 47% of all jobs are at risk of being automated. Things like professional drivers, clerical jobs, manufacturing, a lot of farming jobs. It's a lot of jobs. You know, jobs which require a very soft human touch, subjectivity, judgment, things like management jobs, physicians, therapists, areas where empathy matters, being a teacher, those types of jobs were deemed more safe. But that's you know, certainly a very scary potential future for us. And you know, some people may ask, well, how quickly is this going to happen? And just try to give you a visual illustration of past transformations. Here's a picture of Fifth Avenue in 1900, lots of horses and buggies. I think there was one motorized vehicle there along the side. And 13 years later, it looked like this. So the whole cityscape was completely transformed. There's one horse and buggy there on the side. So in 13 years, a superior technology completely wiped out something else. And of course, you know, when this happened, at the beginning, people thought, oh no, you know, what's going to happen to all those people that tend to horses and drive people around and clean up manure from streets? What's going to happen to those people? And while it may not have been good for the horses, hopefully they saw a nice life in a pasture, for humans it was great. Like there was huge job creation as a result of automation. And that was largely driven by the fact that the accessibility of mobility went sky high, and the use of mobility went sky high. So now you had auto manufacturing, you had a petroleum industry, you had a lot of infrastructure development, housing development in the suburbs. You had new industries like insurance and car detailing and healthcare costs because we drive around bashing into each other. A lot of jobs were created as a result of this, but there's huge economic growth as a result of it. When I look at disruption and this trend of disruption, it's really driven by a few things. So it's driven by how quickly that new disruption gets disseminated and distributed democratically across the world, and how quickly people hear about it. And in an increasingly connected world, and in an economy that's global, for a country to be globally competitive, we have to adopt the most tools that make us most productive. So all of these tools, and AI is no exception, these tools help us be more productive. And if we're not more productive, we're not keeping up with another country that is adopting these technologies. So you can see the pace of technology adoption is increasing, and it's now essentially vertical. So if an AI algorithm comes that's going to make one set of people more productive than another set of people, then both to be competitive, everybody will adopt it, and this change, like when these AI applications come into market, they will be adopted very, very quickly. In the previous field of automation, there's still a lot of jobs being created, but now we're getting to a point where humans, computers can play a lot of the roles that humans do today. So we have to adopt as individuals, and our organizations have to also adopt in this. There's two economic impacts out of it. Some people, like the Oxford study, will say that half of all jobs are at risk. But there's also a positive way of looking at it. This is going to be a massive productivity boost. So countries that lead in the AI adoption, they can expect a doubling in their GDP growth per capita. That was, I think that was an Accenture study that said that. But one thing that is known is, well, people debate which is it going to be. One thing that's known is that the economic value, the value that's being created, is not going to be evenly distributed, right? Like any productivity gain massively reorients how wealth is being accumulated and how it's being distributed. We have to look at whether we want to be a leader in this or whether we want to be downstream and be a buyer of this technology. This is broadly a technology play. So we can ask ourselves, well, how are we doing as a nation? How are we doing as a nation today in building value through new companies? This chart here was done last summer. It shows unicorn companies, so private companies and their market capitalization from their last fundraise. And the size of the bubble shows the value of that enterprise. And these are all companies worth over $1 billion. It's kind of very visually shows that valuable tech companies are not being created in Canada. There's one blip here in Canada, which is Kik, which is a teenage mobile messaging app. That's the only one that's a private company that's valued at over $1 billion, at least last summer, compared to these massive companies being developed in both China and in the US. Even in terms of public companies, you look at it and say, well, where's value being created? And just last year, the rise in tech company valuations has exceeded the value of all other companies. So this is actually very dated. This is 6 months old already, this valuation chart. But it shows that the 7 most valuable companies in the world are tech companies. There's 5 of them in the US, and there's 2 of them in China. Compare that to Canadian tech companies. There was a day when Nortel and RIM had a $100 billion plus market valuation, but that chart's not looking very promising. Right? So are you guys scared yet? Right? We have to do something about this. And one of those things is the Vector Institute that I had a helping hand in. So the story is, this amazing technology that's going to change the world was born here in a university lab here. But the intellectual property and the talent has moved south of the border, and the economic value that was being created was not being created by Canadians, but was being captured by mostly American tech companies. And we thought we'd change that. So Jeff Hinton was actually the very first person. He spent 4 years at Google after ImageNet, but he came back in the spring of 2016. And my partner, Jordan Jacobs, and I, we went to him and said, hey, now that you're back in the country, let's build something massive around AI. Let's build something massive on your legacy. And we found that all of these researchers were leaving because they didn't feel like Canada was taking AI seriously. There wasn't enough critical mass. All the interesting stuff was happening elsewhere. It wasn't just about the money. They wanted to have real critical mass of awesome people. And in the process, we met Ed Clark, former CEO of TD Bank and economic advisor to Kathleen Wynne. He helped us frame the message. He said, if we build this is going to anchor our future economy. We talk about being an innovation economy. We need an anchor to it. And if we have this anchor, it's going to change the economic trajectory of the country. He put us in front of the Ontario cabinet within a week of meeting him. And I made the ill-made mistake in my wardrobe, realizing that everybody in the Ontario ministry wears suits. So despite my rookie mistake, we did succeed. But one of the things that everyone asked us was, well, if we build it, come on, didn't we already give this up? If we build it, will the top researchers come? And I had the following answers to them. So number one is, we have Jeff Hinton, the Einstein of our era. He's here. And he's such a magnet for talent. And he's still so involved in some of his research that he does today, at the age of 70, is still world-leading. We're moving the AI researchers from a 50-year-old engineering building at U of T to this building, which is an amazing hub of talent. This building is within a cosmopolitan city that's one of the most attractive places in the world, which in itself is in a tech corridor, which has spanning Toronto to Waterloo, that has the second highest concentration of tech workers in North America after only Silicon Valley. And you can see the one measure of how vibrant this community is captured by Jay Agrawal, who runs an accelerator out of the Rodman Business School called the Creative Destruction Lab. And this has become the world's #1 AI accelerator. It has 100 companies, AI companies alone, going through it. It's quite an amazing success. Companies from throughout the world fly in here. Investors, in particular Silicon Valley investors, come here to find companies to invest in. And of course, we have the world's best recruiter. Let's just go move right on. There's a moment in time when we can attract the world's best. And Canada has always done immigration better than anyone else. AI is about leading with talent. And there are so many people around the world who are looking for a place to come and do that, really lead AI. And Toronto has so many natural advantages for doing that. So after 4 months of meeting Ed Clark, we announced the formation of the Vector Institute. It's funded by the province, the federal government, and now 40 companies. So it's important that it's not just a publicly funded thing, but companies came behind it. And its goals are to meet a talent shortage, which, frankly, Ontario will be the only jurisdiction in the world that will have enough AI talent to meet industry needs. And that's going to not only help our native companies, but it's also going to attract world companies to set up labs here. We're going to aid in the application of AI within our Canadian companies or the sponsor organizations. And we're also going to be anchoring an AI ecosystem. And not to make this an infomercial, but sometimes when you put in these bold statements, that we can change our trajectory, that we can build the best AI research institute, sometimes you also have to walk the talk and walk the talk and also demonstrate that you can beat the world. So one way that my team did that is we competed in this global competition called the ACM Rexus Challenge. And this is an annual competition, or there's a conference that runs once a year put on by the ACM for companies doing personalization and recommendation systems. As part of that, they have an annual challenge. It's called the Rexus Challenge. And in 2016, Alibaba won it. And the year before that, Yandex won it, which is Russia's form of Google. And in 2017, when we participated, we won it. And we didn't just win it by basis points like they're mostly won, but we had a landslide victory. It's kind of showed. Kind of showed that we can, and our team is composed of people who graduated from U of T, so we can demonstrate that we can beat the world. So that was happened last year. Just concluded last night was another competition. It was called the Google Landmark Challenge, where you're given an image from Google Photos, and you have to find other images that have those same landmarks. Very different type of a challenge. Last night, when I created these slides, we were on top of the leaderboard. It concluded last night. Unfortunately, we finished second, but it's kind of showed again, our ambitions. And we are now part of TD Bank. So for us, there's a bunch of directions that our company could have gone to, but TD Bank, we found a great home at TD Bank. 40% of all Canadians bank with TD Bank, so we feel if we make TD more efficient, we can uplift a large swath of Canadians. But TD also competes in the United States and takes market share there every quarter. So being able to help an iconic brand like TD be more successful is important to us. And another area where we're looking to apply our technology is with this great medical research community that's up and down University Avenue, where we have a huge population base with 100% medical coverage, medical records, great medical research community. And we're putting some of our AI capabilities to help that industry really grow and establish something unique here. Again, very natural for us to lead in that area. So that's a little bit about us. But I'll conclude this presentation with a quote from Geoffrey Hinton, which says, it's hard to predict the future. When people ask him, when will we have self-driving cars, he's like, I don't want to give you a date. But broadly, that AI is going to change everything. We know this is going to have a profound impact. But what's important is that we're a player in this. Often, as Canadians, we are exposed to things that are happening outside of our control. We are a player in this. We have best research happening here. We have amazing talent coming out of here. We have so many Canadian enterprises have sponsored the Vector Institute or are involved in the Vector Institute, so they understand the importance of AI. So I certainly I'd rather be a player and a leader in AI than downstream and a buyer of AI. I think, while a lot of people worry about what will happen to jobs, I think there's an opportunity for us to create an amazing economic value out of AI and continue to grow the tech community. At the top of any tech environment sits AI, and we're a credible, we have a credible position at the very top of that pyramid. So thank you. I think there's some time.
Thank you, Tomi. That was awesome.
Thank you.
I've heard some of it before because, I looked for Tomi and I went to I had to listen to him speak. So, but it's nice always hearing it again. So we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. We will be taking 1 or 2 questions from the audience. So please get your questions ready. But I have a personal question or 2, so I might take some of the time. When you talk about leading change, or when we talk about leading AI, you mentioned that. And you came into Canada, Toronto, and you saw that there was an opportunity and there was a gap. And I know it took a lot, because we spoke about it, to set up the Vector institutes with the help of others. What motivated you? What drove you? Because as a technical person as well, now you were doing something on the people side, on the business side of things. You know, it wasn't just about developing a technical solution. It was about getting buy-in, implementing it, getting people to buy into that idea and make it reality. How did you go about it? What were some of the challenges?
You had, in some of your opening remarks, you said that this is about trying to make a change, trying to make a difference. Take an opportunity when you see it, when you can make the world a better place. And you know, I've known Jeff Hinton since I was a grad student, so I have history with him. Prior to moving back here, I was in Silicon Valley, and I was working on machine learning in Silicon Valley. In fact, I had just finished at Microsoft Bing, their web search engine. I had built the ranking engine that ranks all the web pages. So I'd worked on machine learning, really large-scale machine learning, and I came back here. And I noticed, this is in 2011, I noticed a very moribund tech economy. And I noticed also that while all West Coast companies were at this point in time embracing AI and machine learning, nobody here in Canada was really, you know, clued in to what was going on. And when I went to see Jeff Hinton in 2011, before ImageNet, I was just blown away by the theory that they were working on. So having come from Silicon Valley, where we were all, you know, doing our thing there with AI, and then seeing that there's this tiny little academic department, not even a department, a lab, a group of people, were doing stuff that was well beyond what I had seen in Silicon Valley. It was just astounding to me. So what I had been, ever since I've been back here, I've been trying to help kind of shine a light on the U of T professors and help the industry realize the importance of it. And so that has taken a bunch of different forms, but certainly when Jeff came back, it gave an opportunity to kind of really, shine a light. Like, you know, he was here, so like I would have never been. This is not about me. This is about him and his accomplishments. But he was also a person who was very jaded in having tried and failed to raise any money or any. Having to even like get outside of the University of Toronto Computer Science Department to be able to grow up the team. He had never succeeded in doing that. So he didn't think that it was possible to raise money. Jordan and I first went to the University of Toronto and tried to get them to get funding for it. But we quickly realized that that was also a path to failure. And so there was a moment in time when we realized that there's a lot of hype around this thing, but the reality is not like the hype doesn't match the reality of there only being a few professors and many of them heading to the States. So we realized that the only way that this would actually work is if somebody really owned it and did all the dirty work and did all the work in putting the structures together, did the legal paperwork, and did the fundraising. And so Jordan and I put our lives on hold for what we thought was a short period. It turned out to be a long period. But there was a complete pro bono effort. We didn't get, we weren't raising money for ourselves. We were raising money for a bunch of professors. But you know that it's the right thing to do. It's super important for the economy. And sometimes you realize that the only person who can do it is you. And it requires rolling up your sleeves and actually doing the work. And so we were lucky to have people like Jeff Hinton and the research staff backing the idea. And then we were actually more lucky to get Ed Clark to help support us. So again, as I mentioned, we met Ed. A week later, we were in front of the Ontario Cabinet and secured a $50 million commitment. I mean, that was incredibly fast. That was we concluded the meeting on a late Friday afternoon. We debriefed with him and we said, okay, well, we're going to go to the feds and we're going to go to these companies. Ed, you take those and we'll chase these companies. And my partner Jordan got a call the next morning at 11:30. He had just managed to get his kids out to a Chinese restaurant and got a call from Ed. And Ed said, okay, I spoke to Morneau. He's in for 50. I spoke to another 6 companies. They're all in for $5 million each. I raised $70 million since we last spoke. What have you done? So you kind of know that, at that point in time, we knew that we were on. And it's amazing being able to get the support of so many individuals and so many companies for this effort.
That's really interesting when you say that, you know, some people had tried what you wanted to do before and they were jaded, and this was you coming in to do something others had tried. And obviously employing a different strategy to try and, you know, bring in this change and get buy-in from others. That was so awesome. You know, please, let's give him a round of applause, you know, applause for that, you know. Before I ask my next question, is there anybody in the audience with a question? Okay, there's a question here.
Tomi, thank you for excellent presentation and opening our minds to what is happening through AI. Now, my question is trying to align what change management is doing and what AI is bringing to us. So you are saying that the next change which will come, the adoption will be very, very fast, nearly vertical, like in time space, and will be disruptive to the society and the existing change management thought. The change management thought nowadays is that it takes a few years for an organization to change, right? And for the management to realize that the organization needs to change, that also takes a few years. So the overall length of time we need to realize that the change required and implementing the change is probably to the tune of 4 to 7 years, if my fellow practitioners will agree. So that makes us a very scary scenario. It makes our existing organizations and all these practitioners sitting ducks. What do you have to say for that?
So number one is the professionals in this room will be needed more now than ever, but also need to be aware of the capabilities of AI. And you know, I would say that there's a lot of people like, what's my response to AI and what that means to jobs and large organizations? I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think what makes there's going to be point solutions where AI can do better than humans, and so a lot of like clerical jobs will be a lot of jobs where this very specific function will be more efficiently done by computers. But the same could have been said when ATMs were rolled out by banks. Like, it's no different, right? ATMs, you no longer had to go up to a teller to get your cash. You could go to a machine. And the banking industry doesn't employ fewer people. In fact, we employ a lot more people than we used to employ when ATMs were rolled out. So I think it really matters like how people shift their focus and how we can really be uniquely human in servicing large organizations servicing their customers. So I think it's a matter of doing less like rote, mechanical, repetitive work. Humans will be doing less of that. But I think they will apply their human judgment and empathy in better servicing our customers. So people doing change management have to get that message across to their organizations to say that there's going to be a massive retraining of skills within an organization. It doesn't mean that we are going to employ less people. It means that what people are going to be doing, we're going to be doing vastly different things in 10 to 20 years from now.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that. And that's one of the topics we've been discussing in the change management community in terms of, how is leading change or driving change or managing change going to be very different? And that's where you see some agile frameworks coming out in terms of how to lead change better and faster, or how to manage change better and faster. But I'll even take it a step further, and that's why we're doing something like the Change Leadership Conference, because change, leading and driving change, is no longer going to be about the change management professionals alone. The change management professionals are going to become catalysts in their organizations to lead and guide it. And everybody is going to become a change practitioner in the organization, having those change leadership skills that will help them drive change individually, because it is going to become everybody's responsibility to lead change, their personal change, in order to survive in the next industrial revolution, and to help the organization lead through the change. And that's one question I have for you to tell me about the industrial revolution. So what's the fourth industrial revolution all about? So we're hearing 4IR now. So what can you tell us quickly about the fourth industrial revolution and what it means? Are we in it already?
We're entering it, yes. So a lot of people have compared AI to the next industrial revolution. They've also, somebody has compared it to the advent of electricity. I actually like that analogy better. And even when electricity first came out, you needed, there's debate was the grid going to be DC or AC? There's so much change that happens, but it really will light up our world in a way that we haven't experienced before. It's a very exciting time to be part of it.
It is, and that's what we're excited about. Even next year's conference, it's actually going to be titled Change Leadership 2.0, the fourth industrial revolution, because then we'll be looking further than AI and robotics, but looking at things like blockchain, and even cryptocurrency and what all that means to the organization and how it's going to change. So I know right now we're only just at the peak of it, and there's more to come. Thank you so much, Tomi. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.